Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the April 2019 ELPCO meeting. We're in a new location, as you might notice. This is Youth City in Liberty Park. Really want to appreciate John Lyman, who's in the back here, for letting us hang out here while there's a wedding going on at Tracy Aviary. It's a great location, and I think one thing is that there's so many windows here. We get to look out on the beautiful Liberty Park, and I think everyone's going to jump through the door if I turn my back and go do a lap or two. So we'll have to lock the doors. But again, this is the ELPCO meeting for April 2019. I'm Jason Stevenson, joined by...
I'm Darryl High, and I will announce that next month in May, we will be back in the aviary. So we're competing with a wedding tonight, and since they pay and we don't, we're glad that John's hosting us.
Fire department's over there. Well, we left a trail of breadcrumbs for people to follow from the aviary to here. Well, it's an aviary, but actually signs. So hopefully we'll get some folks coming in that have enjoyed a nice walk through the park. I wanted to recognize a couple folks in the audience here. We have Jeremy Higginson back manning the live feed. Thanks for doing that, Jeremy. Jeremy's one of our ELPCO board members. And also Ellen Parrish, right over here, another ELPCO board member. Yeah, we have couches in this room, so this is actually a good improvement. I also wanted to recognize David Ibarra in the back there, one of the candidates for Salt Lake City Mayor. Thank you for coming by and experiencing our community council. So the agenda might change a little bit just because one of our speakers, Phil Winston, is not here.
Yet.
Not yet, but we still have a little bit to go. He might be following his way over from the aviary. So why don't we jump straight to Detective David King from the Salt Lake City Police Department, so he can give us an update on what's going on at the police department. And actually, I was over there today. So it was nice to be at the Public Safety Building. It's a really nice building.
They bailed you out?
It was pretty quick. It was pretty quick. They found out I work for the ACLU. They're like, oh, we don't want this guy.
So hi, if you don't know me, I'm Dave King with the Salt Lake City Police Department, and looking over the numbers. Again, if you guys are interested in where the numbers are, our ComStat numbers, you can go to the Salt Lake City website and go to Open Data, and then you go down to ComStat, and you get to break it down by the individual districts. And this, of course, is District 5, and you can look and see what everything is. And it looks like everything is still on that downward trend, but there is kind of some areas that they've sent out some emails just kind of notifying us of some different trends and stuff they're seeing. Things I thought was interesting that they sent out. This is kind of taking into account the entire city and taking in within the past 14 days that they are seeing a little bit of an increase in burglaries and stuff. And it was kind of interesting to see how they actually broke it down into days. If you're kind of curious, normally it seems like burglaries happen during the day when people are not home, because of course people are away at work. And then the car prowls happen at night when everyone's sleeping. So one thing I thought was interesting when you look at some of the information that they provided on Sunday. So like, again, like this is going over the last 14 days, combining it. Sunday we had 6, Monday we had 5, Tuesday we had 9, Wednesday there were 4, Thursday there were 9, Friday there were 2, and Saturday there were 5. And so it seems like a majority of the times happened during Tuesdays and Thursdays. Some of the notes they said, it says that 33% of the burglaries happen between 6 a.m. and noon. Something I've always tried to tell people about is that with your house, one of the things that really helps us out is just simple house care, keeping things clean, keeping windows clean, keeping entertainments clean, because we'll go into some houses and there'll be like an inch of dust across the entertainment system. And like I had a TV here and you can see a handprint, but because of the dust, our crime techs are not able to pick up the fingerprints because it destroys everything. So just simple little stuff like keeping stuff clean. Sometimes with burglaries, you can actually see, like I'll go out and I'll take a flashlight and just kind of hold it at an angle going across the window, and you can see fingerprints or smudges. And so a lot of the times you can actually see people where they've taken their hand and they've tried to slide it, and you can see smudges, but because the window's dirty, we are not able to pick up those fingerprints. So just little stuff like keeping the windows clean, just doing simple little stuff too, like getting like a wooden dowel and sticking it in a track to make it so that they can't slide. Some of the stuff that they had, I guess the majority of the stuff they had seen is that are being taken are electronics, yard equipment most of the time is left out, or garage doors left open and people taking stuff, and then of course bikes. So those are some of the main things that we're seeing taken. Luckily, good thing is that we didn't have any reports of any firearms being taken. If you guys have firearms, I am a huge proponent of having, because of the times that we're in. The last thing I want to know is having one of my firearms out somewhere doing something that it shouldn't be doing. You can find stuff that's relatively cheap in different areas. I like having a big heavy safe so someone just can't remove it, and it's a huge peace of mind for me that I know all of my stuff's in there. And I got important documents, credit cards that I'm not using, a lot of tax information I can keep in that. It's fireproof, and I think it's a huge benefit. So that is something I do recommend getting. Burglaries I was talking about, that's kind of like a general over the whole city. For this area, they were talking about some car prowls, and they were the general area. And they get a heat map, so it kind of looks like a bubble and all over. So this is an approximate description. But if you go from like 7th East, I-80, 13th East to approximately 15th South, kind of create like a little heat map showing different stuff. And the biggest time we're seeing with that is basically anytime during the middle or overnight, midnight hours when people aren't out and about and paying attention. And the biggest thing we're taking there are backpacks, wallets that people leave in the car. That includes IDs, credit cards. They're taking electronics, and then just a bunch of random miscellaneous items from the center console and glove boxes. And so, fortunately, I mean, they didn't indicate that firearms were being taken, but again, that's one thing that we do see every once in a while, that people leave guns in cars, and I'm not an advocate of that. I like having my stuff away. I'm a big firearms guy. I love and I support it, but I think that me personally, I like having that stuff locked away where I know it is and it's out of reach of other people. So those are things that we're seeing. My squad, we're kind of trying to get a plan together. I think a couple of us are going to come in a couple times during the midnight hours and try to see if we can try to help find some of these people and either catch them and get them to stop it, or just to either that or just create much of a presence just to kind of push them out. So there's some things that we're looking at, things that we're going to be trying to do and accomplish, and it'll take a little bit of a process, but just keep looking. One of the things that I love too, for my house, I just went to Costco and was able to pick up like a pretty inexpensive camera system. It's awesome. It's fun. I can sit at home. I have it set up. I can watch my dogs when I'm away. They're in an outside kennel, and a lot of technology that's out. Camera. See what's going on. We're in an age of technology, and anything I can do to help protect myself, that's what I'm going to do. It'd be nice if everyone treated everyone as equal, because I'm going to be out of a job. But until then, we're going to keep doing what we can to help you guys out. So does anybody have any questions for me? Mm-hmm.
And they have cameras, and we started neighborhood watch. We know what's going on. We have evidence of things going on. For example, last Thursday night, 3 cop cars they run into the in-between in the parking lot. We have photos, and days later, we're just looking at the residents of the in-between, and they're never showing up on the crime maps or the call-ups. So I'm interested as to why that's happening, what we can do to make, because if the data's not showing up, how are we to keep ourselves safe and know what's going on?
So,
Can you repeat the question too, just so folks can question?
Sorry, it's a really long question.
Yeah, just the basics.
yeah, no. It's not showing up.
What we know is happening,
Mm-hmm.
that the building is not showing up in the data.
So one of the things that is going on is that, or I guess that you can do, if you're in that situation, you can go to. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I got on there. If you just Google and type in Salt Lake City dispatch calls. It'll take you to a link, and it'll actually pull up all of the calls. It'll show you, I think it shows you what's our crime, because I was looking at and received a call there for over a month. It's on our end. It seems like a lot of the stuff that we go there is to deal in some kind of a medical assist. Not the incident occurred somewhere else. The incident could have occurred somewhere else, and someone said, "Hey, I think I saw one," so officers might get there, but because the call was at another location, it's going to show up generated at that location.
So you're telling me if the police show up at a building for some reason, it's not going to show up on the crime map?
Not unless the call was generated there, because there could have been an incident that occurred somewhere else, and that's where it's going to show that the call occurred. But sometimes we might find people like 2-3 blocks away, but the call's going to show that it generated that call.
They have a bad habit of not reporting it unless there's actually a the dispatch will not report it unless they actually think there's a crime in progress. If you specify you want to talk to a police officer, training on dispatch, but that's the issue. That's why it doesn't get to Detective King or the officers on patrol. There's another option, and that is to go online and actually report, get a crime report, fill it out online, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It will show up then. But we're having problems with that citywide. It's not just that area, it's citywide.
And then it has not shown up on the crime map. So I'm like, what's going on here? Seems weird.
Answer that question, because
Okay.
I know that sometimes when people call something, there is a case number, and all of that gets documented.
Okay, so we have 2 case numbers.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so
If
we
you
have
do- if
2
you-
case numbers.
Okay.
So, but those case numbers have not shown up as an incident on the crime map.
How long ago did you report it?
So one of them was in July, and the other one was in
I had someone call. They were saying, "Oh, well, there was this burglary that occurred." When I read the report, it came in where someone heard a loud thump at the
Okay.
door, and there was some damage, but there was no one there.
Okay.
So where it might be dispatched as a burglary, it might get written up as a damaged property.
Okay. Okay.
So sometimes stuff like that kind of gets changed around. So
Got
maybe
it.
you might have called in one thing, and officers, when they showed up, they're like, "I can see why you did it, but this is the classification," so it might have got reclassified a little bit.
But if so in one of these instances, we had a homeless person come and knock on one of our neighbors' doors at 12 at night, asking for the in-between. And so the cops were called. They came out, and they just escorted the lady down the street. We filed a report, never showed up.
I didn't realize sometimes how even just a little paragraph could help out until I got into the position I'm in right now. And so one of the things that I've been trying to tell people is if you call, just let dispatch know. Just say, hey, can I just speak with the officer and I need a case number, and then request, even just say, can I just get a paragraph, a one-line just documenting what had happened, just because we have this issue. Because one of the can happen too is that an officer will go up and then you'll get grumpy officers every once in a while too, that anyways. So just say, hey, look, I'm sorry, this is an issue. I have a case number. I just need something, and then deal with it that way. If they want to throw an argument or whatever, say, let me know and we'll deal with it as we can. So, but that is something you can definitely request just to keep its documentation on your end. Okay? Any other questions? If you have any questions, you can get onto the SLC PD website, and it goes Find My CIU Officer, or my number is 801-799-3624. It's on the program.
It's on the back of the agenda or on the online version on our Facebook page.
So if you have if it's a in-progress thing, if it's a problem, whatever, call our dispatch so it gets documented, but feel free to call me up afterwards to do any kind of follow-up, any questions or anything like that. All right?
Okay.
Thanks, Detective King. Would you be interested if we had a night, we put together a number of years ago a security questionnaire for homeowners and businesses? Okay, see lots of nods ahead, that'd be great. Captain McIntosh from Salt Lake Station 5 is here. Hook and ladder in this little roundabout.
No, it's all right.
No, I'm pretty loud.
You are? Well, this is for online.
Oh, it's for online.
Yeah. Millions of people.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm not a captain, by the way, just a firefighter, but I am up here at Station 5, so your local station. Appreciate you guys giving us a few minutes here. I'll try not to take too much time because it looks like you got a lot of important stuff to go over. But you guys everybody realizes we live in an earthquake zone, so we just want to throw out a couple things for you guys. An earthquake in this area, a large event, the fire department's going to have a pretty dynamic role in this. A lot of people needing help, a lot of structure collapses, water main breaks, things of that sort. So what we're asking you folks to do is go to Salt Lake City or the SLC Gov and go to the emergency management site, and you'll see there's some information on the SAFE program that talks about 96-hour kits. Imagine a lot of you probably have some of that stuff in place already, but if you don't, something to consider. And then just stay informed off of that. Some simple earthquake safety tips. Okay, so if you're laying in bed, I think everybody's first instinct, I know my wife's was when we had the little ones lately, was to jump out of bed. They tell you to stay in bed. Okay, lay on your stomach, roll over, cover your head with a pillow, and then try to keep your arms and everything in close, protect all your vital spots. And then if you're in a car, earthquake, obviously try not to park underneath an overpass, trees, anything like that could fall down on you. So yeah, we saw what happened in San Francisco. That was pretty ugly years ago. I was a little kid, but anyways, I digress. So moving on. If you're in stores, anything of that nature, again, if you can get to the first floor, hide around racks, things of that nature, anything that will offer you some sort of protection if things start falling down. If you're outside, if you can, safely, get into a clear area. And the same thing, stop, drop, and then cover. Even though there's nothing above you, if things start getting thrown around, it'll just kind of help protect your head. And then moving on, wildland season's coming up on us. As you guys all know, watching the news last year, we had a pretty significant wildland fire season throughout the nation. So all this water we've been having is great. It means everything's nice and green, but it also means as the season progresses, that it just gives that much more fuel. So not as big a deal here where we live, necessarily in the urban area, but when you get up on the interface, so if you have family that lives up in the benches area, the avenues, maybe just discuss with them some of the options that they have. you can go to, again, the SLCfire.com and go to wildland fire preparation. There's about 5 or 6 handouts you can look at there, a couple of videos tell you about defensible space. And I'd say even here in our neighborhoods, you know, it's not a bad idea to have that 3-foot defensible area around your home where there's nothing combustible. You know, keeping your gutters cleaned out, things of that nature, so that, heaven forbid, you have a fire next door. It lowers the chances of that spreading over to your home. Okay, but there's some good information on there. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
The big fire season we have in the city is fireworks season.
Yes.
July. Quite a few fires last year. Have you heard about any restrictions, dates, and things like that will be new or different this year?
I have not yet, but that will be on the SLCfire.com. When those restrictions come up, they'll get posted, and I'm sure it will be very. I'm not gonna say I'm sure. I would imagine it will be similar to last season.
Okay.
You know, again, that late in the year, things are starting to get pretty dry. So, anybody else? Fantastic. Thank you.
Phil, you're on. Come on down. We'd like to introduce Phil Winston, known throughout the neighborhood as Northstar Builders. He's built a lot of. You got a fan club, bud. Built a lot of properties in our neighborhood. So he's come. We've invited him tonight. Everyone wants to know what's going to happen with the Great Harvest building. He bought it. He can tell us. So that's a camera. You just got to stand in front of that. That's a camera.
My first question is actually for the firemen. Can I ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a fireman in Salt Lake County for 12 years as a captain and 8 years, but I never got to drive a tiller. Is there any chance I can drive that sometime? Perfect. Do they hire old people? That's it? That sounds like not a bad deal. So I'm Phil Winston. I'm with Northstar Builders. We bought Great Harvest earlier this year. The Great Harvest. This is the parking stuff though. But we bought Great Harvest, and we basically the building is an L right now. We intend to square the building off. So the overhang that used to be the drive aisle for the Texaco station long ago will now be, and that will be squared off. And one tenant we have that is already signed a lease is Vessel Kitchen. They're a local restaurant. They have a place in Park City and one in Midvale now. They're going to be opening there. Their food is ethnic and American, and they serve a wide variety of items. And it's quick casual. So you go in, you order, they package it for you, or you can stay and then you can leave. There's 2 suites in the individual space, and the second suite we have LOIs for right now from 5 different companies, but have not decided who to put in there. We're more trying to get it built out and to see how Vessel Kitchen's final layout will be before we fill in the second spot there. So, no, there will not be. Well, right now there's not plans to put a second restaurant. We're hoping to get something to do with dry goods or sell of goods. We have LOIs from companies like Dara Modern. Another company that inquired is a designer, a design studio that also has a retail section of their business. George.
You're taking out the overhang, but the overhang would be perfect for an outdoor dining area. And this area I thought was trying to encourage walkability, and outdoor dining encourages walkability.
The outdoor dining area will not be taken out. The building will be squared off. From the building to the property line is 11 feet, and that 11-foot area will be pavers from the alleyway all the way down to the end of the property, which will all be outdoor dining. Any other questions regarding that? It's 5,000. 4,950. Timing is we're waiting for the city to issue the permit. We've been in permits now for about 2 months, and hopefully it takes usually 5 to 7 weeks. It's been a little bit longer, so we're hoping to have a permit out within the next 2 weeks, and construction will start. It will only take about 4 months total to build the outside structure and to have it ready to occupy for the tenants. And their tenant improvements usually last about 90 to 120 days.
Tell him high, tell him high says high.
5. And right now there's a entrance on the as you're coming down on the I guess it would be the south side, and the entrance will be taken out and 3 more will be added there also. 3 spaces that aren't currently there will be added to the site. Yeah, that's part of the conversation tonight, that we're probably, this is my poster of all the lost parking spaces, and we work with the city and Tom Millar, who's a wonderful gentleman, but we're having struggles getting, he's probably the nicest city employee I've ever met, but results are not the strong part of that department.
Okay, going back to parking, there's a bus stop there that is interfering, or the parking is interfering with the bus stop. And we're trying to get more people to ride mass transit, but if the bus can't get up to the curb, you're actually making it harder. So that there are 2 parking spaces, diagonal parking spaces there, that UTA, I think, would like to move away or do something with, because it's interfering with the bus getting to the curb.
George, if I can interrupt, you're reserving a second discussion for parking. This is, if you don't mind, I'm just, thanks.
Heads up.
George, you always have great questions. So that's my 2 cents on Great Harvest, the building and the rebuild. Just to have an idea, the building will be a brick building. The building will have quite a bit of glass or fenestration in it, and it will, like I said, have 2 tenants.
What's the height?
The height of the building is the current building. We're not going higher. We're building inside the building and maintaining the height. She's one of my favorite people, so really one of my favorite people. All right, any other questions? It just depends how long the meeting goes. Absolutely.
Just a heads up, we do have the 9th and 9th Street Festival coming up in September. It doesn't sound like it would be totally finished by then. Is that correct, mid-September?
The outside structure probably will be finished by then, but the interior structures will not. They usually, like I said, take 90 to 120 days. Okay. And that is assuming that the city gives me my permit.
Do you have a question? Okay.
Any other questions?
Cool.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming by, Phil, giving us an update on this. To be honest, we've gotten a lot of questions about the Great August. It's a conspiracy theory topic on Reddit, as well as a lot of people emailing us and asking if we know what's happening there. So thanks for coming and telling us about it.
We didn't close it down. It was closed down when we bought it.
Right, it had already gone out of business. Right, okay.
We don't want to be that bad guy.
And I didn't know it was a Texaco station before. Was that going back to the 90s or?
Yeah, there is a great history there, including the house to the north was one in a poker game. There were 2 service stations, one on that corner and one on the dry cleaner corner. The 2 owners were somewhat of gamblers, and they owned it, and he lost the house in a poker game to the owner of where the cleaners is now. But it was 1929, and it was actually Texas Co, and then got changed to Texaco 7-Eleven, and then Great Harvest Bread, believe it or not, was there for 27 years. Incredible. I mean, it's a national chain, but run exactly like a local business with everything that you would expect in a local business. And we were really sorry to see it go. And as a matter of fact, as we were doing testing there, because there was fuel below grade on that site, we spent probably 3 months there every day. And every day someone would come and pull the door thinking that they were going to get a slice of bread. So we were disappointed for them.
Okay. Thanks again for coming by. All right, next on the agenda, I think, Darryl, is the parking discussion, right? So should we have some ground rules? Well, we know a lot of folks have come out for that discussion, so we appreciate that. It's something that has been bubbling up with the 900 South Reconstruction project. Just a bit of background there. That's going to start pretty soon, I think, right? Great. Tom Millar will come up and do that. But something ELPCO's been following, and of course, when this issue came up with parking, we wanted to serve as a forum where everyone could come together and talk about it, you know, have some criticism, have some complaints, but ultimately what we want to do is find some solutions. Find a way that we can make some short-term solutions as well as the longer-term ones, perhaps after the 900 South Reconstruction's done. So I think we'll start off maybe with Tom Millar from Salt Lake City to come up and give us a update on the 900 South project. And then Darryl, I'm not quite sure how we should arrange this, but probably having some roving mics move around and maybe move the camera and have some folks participate. And Phil, do you have a suggestion?
I have an illustration that shows the effect of this on the neighborhood, and
Okay.
I would like to give Tom his chance to speak, and then I would like to show what's actually going on.
Gotcha. So this is an illustration Phil brought, but Tom, we'll give the floor to you to give us an update and perspective.
Thank you.
Just stand right about there.
Yeah. I really appreciate the honest assessment of my personality by everybody. Thanks. No, I really appreciate it.
Couldn't be a nicer guy.
Thanks. My name is Tom. I work for Salt Lake City's Transportation Division, and I believe I've said this a couple times in previous presentations, but transportation and use of the right-of-way is frustratingly fractured between 1,000 different people, not literally 1,000, but a lot of different people and a lot of different departments. And I wish and I would like it to be a lot more cohesive and a lot more community-based. And so to kind of describe what we do in the Transportation Division, we handle the study and the design of our roadways. And then our Engineering Division moves those designs into more of a construction management piece where they're managing the contractor or they're helping to actually rebuild those streets. And that happens when a street is completely redone. If a street is just receiving some maintenance like some new stripes or a fresh layer of kind of it's called a slurry seal or a chip seal, it's another division, another department. So as a city, we've been trying to collaborate more and make sure that our discussions are much more inclusive. And so the great role that transportation gets to fill is being able to come to community councils, hear feedback, incorporate the feedback, plan for the future, and ensure that that our shared common goals are realized. I think that there are some things that we can all agree on. Parking is important. Raise your hand if you think parking is important. As do I. Salt Lake City is growing. Raise your hand if you do agree with that. Definitely true. Driving is very expensive. I did a study today that the average American, and that's sort of like a median income American, spends over their working lifetime about $350,000 on maintaining, owning, and parking just one vehicle. So if it's one vehicle per person, that's about how much they spend. And obviously we know that it's much more expensive proportionally for people who have lower incomes than the median. And as a city, we want to create a place for everybody. So obviously we are not anti-car by any means, but as we do some of our projects, we reach for a more equitable approach that allows people of all ages and incomes and backgrounds and abilities to be able to use our shared public right-of-way, which really belongs to all of us, and the city is just a steward of it. And then lastly, I believe that we can all agree that we all want a successful, thriving, vibrant 9th and 9th neighborhood. Raise your hand if you agree with that, or clap, or. That's true. Yes. Oh, we all have. Yeah, we have different definitions of success and completeness and vibrancy. So I just wanted to give you a brief recap of the project that we'll be doing in 2019. and then talk to you about some of our ideas about parking, and then really to just listen to everybody in what you have to say, and so that we can make a path forward, better solutions for the future, like Jason said. So the 2019 project will only be going from Lincoln Street, which is about 940 East, to 100 East. It will, the bulk of the work will be rebuilding the roadway. So right now it's asphalt, it's chipping off, there's potholes everywhere. We'll be rebuilding that road in concrete that's built to last for 50 years and not just 10 or 15 years. Part of work next week, and he means it. So starting on Tuesday, he will begin by removing the railroad tracks that are currently underneath the asphalt, and he'll be working on that for a couple of weeks, and then after Thursday, he'll start on some of the curb and gutter and some of the driveway work just on the north side of the street between Lincoln and 1100 East, so before you really get going up the hill. And again, as we've communicated to most of you, anytime that the contractor will be working in front of your business, or closing needing to close a driveway approach to re-pour it, if it's in poor condition, they'll be coordinating with you directly so that those impacts can be mitigated, and so that you don't have to wonder where they're going to be and when. And they'll be likely done with that curb, gutter, and driveway work by the end of May, and then likely we'll keep moving up the hill, similar work, and then be coming back to do some of the more major work as well. Are there any questions so far on that project, George?
The concrete has a tendency to be real noisy, but the concrete has a way of being noisy. Is there a way to change the consistency or design so that the adjacent residents aren't impacted with noisier streets?
That's a really good question. We've been working with our engineering division to ensure that the of a higher quality than we have before. Both the mixture of said concrete, but also the texturing and the design of it, in order to cut down on some of the road noise.
The crosswalks, are they going to be raised, and will there be hawk lights or some kind of safety lights for crossing?
That's a really good question. There will be one intersection with the flashing lights. It's the intersection that currently has the flashing lights. That's McClellan Street. That crosswalk will be reduced. The crossing distance will be reduced so that Steve doesn't have to walk 80 feet across the road every day to work. He only has to cross one lane at a time, and is out in the road for much longer. There will be some raised crossings as part of the project. One of them is at that McClellan crosswalk, where it currently is, will be raised. And then the crosswalks at the roundabout will also be raised. And that was a concern of our accessibility community when we were talking about doing the roundabout, and we're seeing support from the community around that they wanted to be sure that speeds in the roundabout and yielding in the roundabout was about as good as we could possibly get it. So we've designed the roundabout so that it is a slower speed roundabout. It's just a single lane, and the pedestrians definitely have the priority there by design, and not just by flashing lights or signs or anything like that.
Is the bicycle pedestrian lane or separated bikeway going to be have the raised area also? Because in some cycle tracks they don't raise the walkway there.
That's a really good question. The trail, which will be a bike trail, the sidewalk stays where it is, and a bike trail will be added just for those who are traveling by bicycle. It will be above the curb, which means it'll be not in the roadway. It's not a painted bike lane. It's a raised bike lane, and then where it crosses the major road, 1100 East, it will be raised there as it goes through the roundabout. At the minor streets, at McClelland, at 1000 East, it will not be raised. It'll be similar to how the crosswalks are there now. Yeah, good question. Okay. I have a couple of, wanted to answer a couple of questions kind of preemptively. Yeah, some questions have been raised, and I just wanted to talk about some of those. There are 9 on-street spaces that the design will repurpose for other things. So those 9 on-street parking spaces that are in front of businesses. 2 of those spaces are in front of Northstar's building, one on 900 South and one on McClelland. And then the other 7 are at the roundabout. And the reason why we couldn't salvage the parking spaces at the roundabout is only because you can't park inside of a roundabout. And because of the size of it and the design of a roundabout, we lose the spaces on the northwest corner and on the northeast corner. So on the Charlotte's corner, and then also on the new law firm building, which is also co-owned by Northstar, and that's where we're losing those spaces. So 7 of them will be repurposed for the roundabout, and then 2 of them will be repurposed for that the interface of both the trail that runs along 900 South and the trail that runs along McClelland Street, to ensure that it's a safe connection, but also as short of a crossing as possible, so that we don't have people in the roadway when they don't have to be. So, any questions about that? Yeah.
Why did they have to make that roundabout so big?
That's a really good question. Do you want to repeat it?
Why don't you ask it again?
Just for the microphone. I heard you.
Why is the roundabout so big?
Good question.
When we were looking at it at the thing, there's no way it was ever going to look like that.
Yeah, so when we did the pop-up roundabout last year, we had to do it within the existing space on the roadway that we had. We couldn't move curbs for the test. So we made it as big as we could for that test. And what we saw was if we had a circle that small, it didn't offer us what's called deflection. And deflection is the amount of out-of-direction travel that a car has to do in a roundabout in order to slow them down as they're going through the intersection. Such a small circle wouldn't have gotten us that deflection. And having a slightly larger circle actually increases the capacity of the intersection, which is really, and by capacity I mean how many cars the intersection can move through it without jamming up. And a third reason why is because of the 5th leg that's in that intersection, which is Gilmer Drive coming off at that diagonal. Because that comes in at such an odd angle, having a smaller circle would mean that leg would still be treated as the odd man out, and it wouldn't be as an equal partner with all of the other streets. And we saw that as a major issue of the existing design, and we wanted to solve that.
I talked to Aiden, I don't know his last name, but he said that one of the reasons why was because if they didn't make it bigger, then people would just cross through straight.
That's what I mean by deflection.
And,
yeah.
well, that's ruined that whole corner. The whole corner is just,
We will be trimming back some of the park strip space just at the corners on the northeast and the northwest sides within the public right-of-way, not on private property, but we'll be adding a lot more green space, landscaped area on the south side of the road as well as in the center of the road. So the amount of green space, pervious space, and not just roadway space will be increased at the intersection because of the roundabout. Right now it's a very, very large intersection because it has to accommodate not only the width of 900 South, but that very odd, the Gilmer Drive intersection. And one of the crosswalks is actually about 110 feet long, which at an average walking pace takes about 35 seconds to cross, which is a long time to be in the roadway, especially for kids, for dogs, for older people who live in our neighborhood. So obviously the design doesn't accomplish everything for everybody all the time perfectly, but we feel that with the opportunity to do that redesign, it definitely accommodates as many as we possibly can in the best way possible. So.
This shows a loss of a total of 38 spaces.
Okay.
As measured using the Utah parking standard for
Okay.
Salt Lake City. And while you are right, in terms of business impact, your numbers may be close, but in terms of neighborhood impact and overall impact, the number is much greater. And I've created a database of all of the areas on this map and photos of cars parked there, with one caveat. Several of the cars are my employee cars, as we parked in the areas where parking was allowed, just to show parking spaces and parking spaces lost. Would you walk through with me and correct me if these are not correct?
Sure, and there have been sorry.
Why don't you guys both be up there?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. And it's
What's that?
I should say to refer to what Phil said, the way that we measure parking spaces, because they're not marked on the street right now, there's not a space painted on the road for every space. If it is the first space, for example, if you have 5 spaces in front of your home and a driveway on either side, the spaces on the end we count at about 17 feet, which is about the length of a car. We don't count the 5 feet before your driveway, because it's not legal to park within 5 feet of a driveway. And then the parking spaces in the middle we count at 22 feet long. So as we were doing our measurements, we made sure that if they were the first parking space, we counted a 17-foot space, and then the next ones we counted 22 until we got to the next driveway or street, and then we counted it at 17 again.
What I'm going to illustrate is that people don't need 17 and 22 feet to park their cars. And currently, if you go over into the neighborhood now, or you've been there in the morning, cars are parked there. We use a 21-foot number for our spaces in here as a consistent number across the board. We were shy by 3 or 4 feet, but have photos of not just our cars, but 5, 6 cars parked in some of these locations. So I'm going to start with this side here, which is the uphill side of 9th South beyond Gilmer.
That's the 5-way stop right there, right?
That is the 5-way stop. And if you can see, probably hard to see in my picture, there's a mark right here on the sidewalk. That is the mark where the current bike trail and will be allowed again. And that we have, I believe, 7 spaces in that space. All of those are gone. No parking spaces there. There are 3 uphill here. The bus stop takes over some, and they wrap in. The bus stop ends up here. So these 2 spaces are gone. If you look at their map, it looks like this 3rd one is gone, but it's a possibility that that one stays. The 3 that are here that are before the entrance to the building on 1105 are gone. This probably only qualifies for 2 of their parking stalls, because this is where people have cheated it in because of the driveway, and there's always 3 cars parked there. But those would be removed as well. So just in this top half, we have 17 spaces gone. The 2 spaces that are here in front of Charlotte's, it appears on the map that both of those are gone as well. As you come down, because of the wraparound in the bike trail, the 3 spaces that are the first 3 spaces next to the Coffee Espresso, they're gone. When you come down to our building, the road is widened because of the narrowing here. These 2 spaces are gone, and our single space here is gone, and Hip and Humble's single space here is gone. I'm going to give you a few minutes to go through and tell me which
Sure.
ones are wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Just to clarify, all the red things are parking spaces. The ones with the black X's through them are the ones that are gone.
That are lost because of this, yes. And we didn't go down on Lincoln, and we didn't go to the opposite side of Lincoln because it pretty much stops and goes back to regular roadway there. So you can kind of see. Now, I'm going to, again, say this with a caveat. they're probably legal spaces have other rules. For example, you could say that this isn't a space because the sidewalk is there, and the city does require that you move 20 feet inland from the turn to put a parking stall. However, when they push this out, this will be 20 feet away, and we will be losing that stall. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. Right, that occasionally you can, and you'll see this out on the street, you can fit more cars in a space than perhaps we would if we were to paint the parking spaces. That is very true. And I think that on this map, it equates to maybe a gain of one spot that we hadn't counted as a space that we were removing. There are a few spaces that are marked in X's that we will not be removing, either because we've worked with the community on identifying opportunities to gain that space back somewhere else, or to just leave it into the street altogether. And I don't know if you want me to go through.
Please point those out.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
I went with the last numbers you gave, and it takes the 38 lost parking spaces from Lincoln up. And with the number you gave, using legal parking stalls as you described it, there's a loss of 26. Now, you're correct about businesses being right adjacent. So these could be considered residential spaces, and this could even be considered residential spaces. So if you go through that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So on this south side of 900 South, east of the 1100 East intersection, there are, I'm sure some of you know the Normans who live on this corner. Up until their property line, which is quite a ways east, they currently have 10 parking spaces, so about 200 feet of parking, and 5 of those will be removed for not only the design of the roundabout, but also the design of the trail through there, instead of the 7 that are drawn on here. On the north side, the only spaces that will be affected are the spaces that are west of your driveway, right?
In front of my house, you can park, and nobody would be able to park them.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is from your driveway to the intersection. So just from here down, that it is true that you will not be able to park, though the space in front of the second residential home up the street will remain. That won't be affected by the design of the roundabout.
4 cars here, but I accounted for the fact that the bus stop was there, so I removed it. So technically, right now, there are 4 spaces in front of her house that have been used. So her house and 3 more, and I only put 1. So how many of those are gone? All of them?
And as we had measured it, it was let me look at this just to confirm. It was 3 from the 2 in front of the Lieberman-Siebers building, and then 1 between your property line and your driveway. But yeah, those 3 will be removed. Some of the improvements to the street, for example, bus stops, right now are just a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But you put in bus stop right in front of my house.
Yes, that's true.
When you put that bus stop there, the bus stop is blocking the driveway.
No, we'll have all of the bus stops far enough away from driveways that the tail of the bus. Well, I think that's the discussion, is whenever we make a decision based on somebody's input, somebody else is upset. One of the reasons why we put the bus stops on the before you get to the intersection is that we don't want a bus stopping right after the roundabout and then everybody behind that bus stopping in the middle of the roundabout. And they are, and they will be affecting the cars that are coming down 900 South, but they won't be affecting all of the other vehicles that are going on all of the rest of the legs. Yeah.
Hey, Tom. Dan Colangelo. I'm just looking at this and wondering how we got in an environment where we have intensifying uses, whether we commercial uses where the demand for parking has actually increased. If you look at their parking survey, and I think the number one request was for more parking, street parking, not less. How we got from the design phase to this, or from a macro level, you're losing 30 spaces without anyone having a discussion about parking. It seems kind of like, was it intentional, or was it?
Let me answer part of that question. This was presented to the city as a solution and an increase in flow of traffic while making the neighborhood more personable. Slow cars down and do that. There was never a discussion about lost parking. And I've spoken to Aaron Mendenhall, Charlie Luke, James Rogers, Amy Fowler, all personally on the phone in the last 2 days. They had no idea that parking was affected as part of this. So understand that the engineering department created a great proposal for the slowing of traffic, but did not look at the impact of parking. And they're now looking at the impact. And I have to tell you that Tom has spent a tremendous.
Is on site, right? You know.
But I'm going to tell you that it can still be stopped in the city, and that my company and several others in the neighborhood plan to take action if the project continues.
Not to take too much time, but I've been
Mentioned something about losing only 7 spaces. I don't know where I got that number from, but I thought it was from you.
It was, yes. I said,
Okay, so
I said
what
9.
happened in the meantime?
I said, yes, I said 9 spaces that were in front of businesses, the businesses that had brought their complaints to us. Obviously, there are other spaces that are being lost that are residential spaces, and that's why I wanted to continue this conversation, because while we are seeing a loss, we also want to have the discussion of how we manage our parking better in the future, because only adding the physical parking spaces is not going to solve the parking issues that we have.
Okay, Tom?
It's only, just 1 second. We're going to reach a tipping point where we can't build any more parking, and then what do we do then? And so in transportation planning and in being able to reimagine what some of these streets look like, as we refocus where we're going as a city and being able to offer a more equitable access to all of these places for people who do have cars. Obviously, there's still over 400 parking spaces that remain, but also people that do not or just choose not to for that particular trip. We hope that we can start bending away from this just building and building and building until we reach this point where we have to change, and trying to change now before we're stuck. And
Yep.
I know that it's really hard.
Tom,
and I
I'm
know
sorry to
that-
interrupt, but
Yeah.
that's a big picture issue that doesn't have to do with this. I've been involved with Nelson Nygaard, and it got frozen because of the
It did.
backlash from businesses on Sugar House in downtown.
Yep.
So this area is the issue right now, because you're letting a contract out. We were under the impression that we were going to lose like 7 or 8 spaces, and we're now losing 38 or more.
It's not 38, and it's not more than 38.
Okay.
I just want
whatever
to
it
be
is,
clear.
It's way more than.
I receive emails. I receive
This
emails
group
every day, and
filed
it's
a lawsuit because of parking spaces. That's how important parking is.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
If now the parking is lost a lot more, that's a big issue and should stop the contract going forward until we figure this out. There are spaces that could be, if the city and the residents and the businesses want, we could use some of the park space, but we're giving up 2 lanes of traffic. We shouldn't be losing that many parking spaces.
And to speak about the redesign, just briefly on your last point, the redesign as it's been modeled with the improvement to the intersection with a roundabout actually moves more cars through that roadway with less space than the current design does, with having everybody stop on all 5 legs at that intersection. Yeah. So just to say that we're losing lane space does not mean that we're losing capacity. We're actually increasing capacity by quite a bit.
We're losing way too much parking, more than what we were told up front.
And I did.
This area is so upset about parking, they filed a lawsuit on it. That's how important it is. Parking is important. So you're telling us now it's totally totally different than what you were telling us before. It's not your fault. I know the political issues in the city very clearly saying no more parking, but they don't like parking.
Can I just make a comment? We're at time, kind of, and so if you want to make a comment, please bring up something new or different to add to the discussion, and I think we want to have a wrap-up pretty soon, but I want to make sure we get as much as we can from the audience and perspective. I think we've got
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there something new?
Since we brought up the bigger picture, I recently just went to a presentation put on by Envision Utah and Utah County, talking about how to address issues in Utah County. And they've been very driver-friendly, parking-friendly, and now they're in big trouble. And I just appreciate what the city's doing to try to build public transit infrastructure, more modes, facilitate more modes of transportation here. Also, I think parenthetically, the 9 bus will actually mitigate a lot of the parking demand because people will be taking public transportation. So those are just my thoughts really quick. I think this is a great situation, and I don't think we're actually I don't think parking is that big of an issue. I grew up in the Bay Area. It's a bigger issue there.
Okay. Ellen,
I would agree. I was just telling Phil that in 5 years we're going to have driverless cars that are 18 inches between bumpers. It's coming. And everybody freaked out. I remember you freaking out when they turned 13th South into a 2-lane road, and it is faster. It didn't slow us down one bit. These are engineers. This is urban development science. It's not emotional. And one more thing about winter, which is there is no bad weather. There's only bad outfits. So the future's coming.
So why did we go through this whole community input process if the vision is going to be yours and not really ours? Because
well, the design that we came up with for the road, the redesign we didn't have a preconceived notion of how everything was going to be. That's why I wouldn't have spent.
Is, more equitable transportation, getting people out of cars.
Yeah, those are our overall goals.
I don't think anyone here would argue with you, but given the canvas that you have and the size of the space that's available with park strips and removed lanes of traffic, it seems like it would be an optimal time to create some fairly cool parking solutions, but it was never really addressed, and maybe it would have been addressed if we had had an upfront discussion like we're having now about parking.
I think that's a great point.
8 months ago.
Yeah.
But we never had it.
I think that's a great point.
We were over there with.
So it's like we all brought it up 2 years ago, and you guys moved forward.
So we're here now,
Any voices
and we have
surprise.
contractor and.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dan.
I just want to say one point, what's your name, sir? Oh, Robert. What you don't understand is you like living where you're living, because we for years have been trying to protect 9th and 9th. I've had that property since 1985. I know that doesn't sound that long, but you have no clue what would have come in and what would have happened to that whole area for years and years. So you can say, oh, well, it's not like the Bay Area, because we have been trying to be on this to keep our community the way that we like it, so it is a fun, great place to come, and not, whoa, you're getting hit by a scooter and you're getting hit by this. You know, we've spent years protecting it and talking about it and doing it, and when each project has come up and we say, well, what about the parking? And then people will go, oh no, we won't do it by project by project. We'll come up with this plan. Well, it is project by project. If the project doesn't have enough place to park, it affects everything. And again, I definitely am very personal on this, and I was like with Phil on his building that came next to me there, because now I can't get out of a driveway. They have a island going through, so I can't turn left.
You will be able
go
to.
into my thing. Well, I talked to a guy today, and now I have a bus stop that's going to be a house in front of my house. You know, there's just a lot of things, and we have to protect our area, and that's why I don't think you understand. You know, it's easy to come up and say, "Oh, it's great. I don't have a problem parking." Well, you don't have to park because you park at your house.
I don't drive.
Okay, well, see, then you don't have a problem. But I just want you to realize, because I've heard, excuse me, sir, I just want you to realize what has come on before you, because and not to do against your comments, but every time almost you talk, you always go, "Oh, it's great, this house is great." You don't understand the lifeblood
so people know.
Okay. Was, could, and still should be.
We've got someone who hasn't commented yet.
That's just a quick question.
Thank you.
It's totally off of this theme, but have you looked at, and are there any options on any of the side streets? Because I just noticed I live on 10th South, just a few houses off 9th. And I can't frequently, I mean, just now I parked on Belmont because I can't park on 10th East. And a lot of this is the schools. So it's, I mean, there are cars that are there for 7 or 8 hours a day. Now, I don't know if we have any option to even negotiate with Roland Hall or negotiate with East or anything, but I think that plays, I mean, they're taking up, these places used to turn over pretty quickly. Somebody come in, they go to yoga, they'd park in front of our house, they'd be gone in an hour. They'd run into Contender, 15 minutes, they'd be out. They're locked up for 8 hours, 9 hours, 7 hours a day. So I don't know if there's any options, if you guys looked at that, thought about that, if that's just something we have to
That's a really good question, and I'll answer your question in kind of my wrap up after any other questions get asked, if that's okay.
I've got one last comment, and it kind of feeds into what you've said. They're doing the roundabout because it will increase the flow of traffic so that the cars can get through quicker, and it will handle more cars than the old system did.
Well, that is a benefit of it. That's not the
hang
principal
on,
reason.
That's what you said.
Why we're doing the roundabout.
That's
The
what
reason
was said,
is that
and
the
it'll handle more cars.
Phil, I'm
that
just
have
going to
no
answer your question.
Let me finish my statement.
Okay.
They'll handle more cars that can go through there that don't have parking. It's not the issue. And that we're not unhappy with the roundabout, and it's not about the issue that we're asking the city to add more parking spaces to 9th and 9th. We're asking that the city not remove more spaces from 9th and 9th.
Right.
We don't need to add any more. The comment about driverless cars is true. The comment about Uber is true. People take Uber more than they ever did before. All those things are true. But see if there's got to be a solution where the reduction is not at a loss of 29 spaces, because it matters to the businesses.
Thank you. And the residents. Yes, that's very true.
Tom, do you have a sum up, or?
I do. Okay. I do have a sum up. I have. Oh, sure.
Okay.
You know, we've been screaming about parking for 30 years, and it's never been addressed in the neighborhood ever collectively, right? And so obviously we are here tonight. So at what point, and again, I wrote you a letter and you said parking is a priority. If it's a priority, it should have been addressed, especially given the loss that we have here. Yet it was never brought forward. There was no indication that there were losses. So at what point, as a community in these projects, having screamed forever, residents and businesses alike, that parking is a problem in the 9th and 9th area, at what point do we address it? After this doesn't work. I mean, the impact that it has on this community is incredibly significant, both residents and businesses alike. And you know where I stand on that. But where do we address it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me answer it with two parts. The first one is that all of the properties that have on-street parking spaces in front of them that are losing those on-street parking spaces, or the spaces are being repurposed for something else, for a different design, were informed of the changes as soon as we had the design finalized. We did not know what the exact impacts would be or where they would be until we had that finalized, and that was in about December or January. And so as we've been doing our outreach over the last few months, we've been talking to each of the individual property owners that do have parking in front of their properties that are being affected, and we've been having those conversations, and I think that's what's led us here, is that we've been having those conversations with the individual properties, but we wanted to have the broader conversation with the group, which kind of leads me into my second point, which answers a couple of the questions that have been brought up, and that is that for a long time everybody has been asking for a study, a brainstorm, everybody getting together, figuring out what we're going to do with parking, because the current way that we do it is not only untenable but also unsustainable in either going project by project, adding it or removing it or keeping it the same, is not our preferred approach at all. And so with a commitment from the transportation division and the engineering division and with our department leadership, we are gonna, and I guess this is like part 0 of probably many, or part 1 of many. We are going to convene a group, and we're gonna do a study not only of parking but of the use of that public right-of-way, especially that park strip area and sidewalk area that is that very hotly contested and sometimes confusing area. And so we will have our goals from that effort are going to not only be producing something, but first and foremost in listening to what the concerns are, and then second, collecting very, very, very detailed and informative data, not only on where the spaces are, but also when they're used, how often they're used, when they're full, when they're empty, so that we have a better idea of what each of these parking spaces does and what purpose they serve, whether it's to accommodate a residence, whether it's to accommodate a business, or both. And then I hope that the results of the study will be a better management of the assets that we already have, rather than just either removing parking or adding parking or keeping it the same just because we think that that is the best way to go. The study, that's a really good question.
Can you restate the question?
Sure. The question was whether the study would be after the reconstruction. I think that we can start it as soon as we possibly can, as soon as everybody is willing and able and available to do so. And I think that as we are redesigning this part of the road, as we're redesigning other roads in the city, we're going to need to be able to compare the before and after as well, and see what some of those impacts have been, either perceived or real impacts, and to make sure that it's not this project by project approach anymore, but really that we're looking at everything from an area, and not just counting the parking spaces that are right on the corridor or right off the corridor, but looking at the broader use of parking throughout the 9th and 9th area.
Can I ask something?
Sure, go ahead, David.
You know, resident, but 9th and 9th is important to our city, and it's
very,
and it's an example of the things that we want to do throughout the city, 9th and Central and others. But why is it when we get to a point to where there's obviously disagreement, the outcome may be the same, but why not just pause and stop and have the discussion? Because things are better. I've loved coming to all of these council meetings, but I tell you what, things are better when we start with people, and then make the decision based on people, because we're people serving people.
Yeah.
But why not make the recommendation to pause?
That's a really good idea, and I think that the people-based approach is what we have been trying to do. It is obviously not the outcome that. Sorry.
Would it be possible to pause? Would it be possible to go back and just say, hey, let's take 60 more days and talk?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible?
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that question. When I've asked similar questions about what's our flexibility at this point, where do we go from right now? The feedback that I've received from the city engineer, from our department leadership, is that the design on this project is not going to change, but that our approach to the entire area and how we manage the parking better and the assets that we have should definitely change, and should change immediately.
Okay.
It's not because it is not on it's not on private property. It's public. It's not public property in that it's not a parcel. It's just public right of way. So it's and that's that to Dan's point is the legality is that we can engage and we can change things in order to serve the broader community and the broader city. But the legality of it is that it does belong to all of us as city residents, and then the city is the steward of that space and is managed.
I mean, if it belongs to all of us, then you guys should make all the decisions. And I'm kind of noticing this pattern with Salt Lake. I mean, putting in a homeless shelter in someone's residential neighborhood. I mean,
It's
such
a
a pattern of this situation. How do we get a say?
It is a really good question, and one that I may not be able to answer completely, but it's in my kind of political experience, it really is this difference between representative government and direct democracy, and how we whether we always make decisions based on the direct public feedback, or whether we pull back and look at the broader view, or bring in the professional opinions on either transportation planning or parking or right-of-way use. And it is this really delicate balance, and it's never easy to make changes, and it's never easy for me to make changes as a smiling, nice guy when people don't like those changes, and it is really hard for me. But as a city, our overall goal and our overall vision is to make sure that we do have a more balanced system, and some of those changes do happen project by project. Some of them happen in a broader policy, but it is really hard when we do lose things that we're used to having, which parking is definitely one of those.
Everything with this project as it's going forth has been signed off. Like it's ready to go. It's going to happen.
It has been signed off. Yes, I don't mean to say that I don't hear you, or that the power doesn't rest in your hands anymore. But yeah, as our current trajectory is, we have it signed off. The contractor is ready to go and is planning on going. I don't know.
I want to tie this up a little bit. We are about 45 minutes over. We knew this was going to be an intense discussion. I do appreciate how folks have kept things civil. It's kind of the ELPCO ways. We try to make it so that we have a good discussion. We cover some things. What I'd like to do, just wrap up, is kind of talk about some of the things we've learned.
Sure.
And one of them, I think, is that there's different ways to count parking spaces. There's the city way, and then there's another way that Phil has done based on sort of maybe actual experience or how people park and what people can squeeze in here. So that accounts for some of the variation in numbers. Another variation in number is what you looked at was the spots in front of businesses, which was about 9, I believe, right? That were directly contacting you and talking to you. And then sort of the overall ecosystem of 9th and 9th, where we're talking about in the 20s or 30s with regard to that. So I just want to make sure we're talking about some facts and have some ground rules about where these numbers come from, why we talk about different numbers, and that way we can move on from that and actually get to the solution side. And I think we heard a couple of solutions come up. One, and actually was mentioned, was the 9th and 9th survey that we did, where the #1 recommendation was any new development has got to have more embedded parking. And Mutual Beauty is where that comes from, that condo development, where originally they had half a parking space per unit. Everybody knows those half cars. We see them driving around. They're really great, very fuel efficient.
Is that a smart car?
I think it was just an SMT car. They cut out a couple letters. So we sued for 2.5 years. ELPCO sued. We lost, but we tied it up enough that they ended up putting 1 parking space per unit. Okay, so that wasn't necessarily the right solution, because there's still stuff in the books. There's still policies which allow developers to get away with very few parking spaces. Throw a bike rack out in front of a development, and all of a sudden you can cut a couple parking spaces. You know, whether or not is actually feasible or people use it. So there's some policy decisions at the city that I think we at 9th and 9th and ELPCO need to address, so that future developments, the next Mutual Beauty, for instance, what's going to happen to the Roland Hall campus when they move up to Garsman's Way? You know, that's a huge development opportunity there. You know, what we have to start preparing for the next thing with better policy, so that, you know, the developments that come in have to follow the rules that we want, not the rules that they want. Another issue that came up was student parking. East High, Roland Hall, we seem to have a lot of overflow of those students on some of the streets, especially just off of 9th and 9th. That's a solution that we can work on independent of this project right here. Talk to some of the principals, talk to people there, figure out how we can consolidate their parking, teach them how to parallel park, you know, good stuff like that. But then also set some time limits, especially those that are adjacent to businesses that are affected by this. So we can talk about some solutions there to get that. Darryl, did you? Or residential only parking, right, which is sort of a bit of a nuclear option, but something that has come up, particularly on Lincoln Street, right, regarding mutual beauty. I'd like to focus more on these solutions. Once we advance beyond the idea that, hey, we've got a problem, let's start working on those solutions, and I hope the convening that you've talked about will really focus on that. You know, I think one other element to think about is when we've been working on this project for about 2 years. Going back to the original meetings at Tracy Aviary, and even the one where the roundabout first came up. I remember that, where the residents were like, hey, what about a roundabout? We want to be European and have baguettes and be French. Let's have a roundabout. And it was not on your agenda at all. We had to kind of force you guys to do that.
And imagine if we had suggested a roundabout.
Well, that's true. It would have been kind of crazy. Well, and when we were thinking about that, we were thinking about the loss of traffic lanes. We were thinking about the design, the Gilmer closure, the Norman plan, all this stuff. I never remember parking coming up. Now, I know business owners, you guys probably had that on your mind, but I don't remember it really being front and center within these discussions. And I think this is a lesson for the future. We better put a big post-it note with parking and make sure that any transportation, lane reduction, roundabout, things like that, keep that discussion from the very beginning going forward so that we're not, you know, right before we're starting to break concrete, having a big discussion about this and people feel like they've been left behind and haven't actually been able to contribute. So I think that's another lesson that we've learned from this experience. We need to address parking early and often, and not just from the business community. You guys think about it a lot, but the residents as well. We've got to remember that that's an important consideration. And we have different opinions on parking. Some people don't have cars, don't drive. They have a very different opinion than folks who got 2 cars in their garage, or don't have a garage and don't have a driveway and need to park on the street. A very different consideration. So we are a little bit over. We have Tim Cosgrove, who actually came from the mayor's office, already went to a community council meeting tonight, right? You were at East Central earlier, our rivals. We actually had a war with them several years ago. It was very intense. I want to turn things over to Tim, but Tom, what I want to make sure is that when you do this convening or when the business owners do it, we publicize it, we get as many voices in the room as we can so that we can work on those solutions. And those of you that maybe have seen the sign-up sheet move around, definitely put your name and number down there, your email address especially. We're probably going to create a special group to address this, maybe even a special Facebook group or something like that. If you want to get the ELPCO newsletter, just do the QR code that's on the sign-up sheet as well. We publish 2 a month, and we'll definitely be covering this issue so that anything that happens, folks will get. I'd like to turn it over to Tim Cosgrove now, who's been waiting in the back to address what's going on from the mayor's perspective, and then we have one more announcement, and then we'll be adjourning.
Thank you, Jason. So I don't know what I can really say to top what you all have done here tonight. I am so impressed. I really got to give you my respect. The way you've handled this, the way you've presented the issues, the way you've shared and had this conversation. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for your good work. And thank you. I mean, to look outside on a day like today and know that there's people that are committed and engaged, that's empowering. And having this opportunity to make our communities like we want to make them. So my hats off to you. I don't have much. I do have the mayor released a micro grant opportunity today for organized community councils. It's to help build sustainability. It's a grant that's available from $50 to $1,500. Allows you to get like a printer for your community council. But it's the applications are due by May 22nd, and you can contact either me or Jen Seelig in applying for that.
I could probably buy half a car with $1,500.
Yeah, well. And then the other opportunity is we're doing a lot to recognize our veterans. We have the Freedom Loop, and I'll just go ahead and pass this around. It's a flyer to support after our veterans are deployed and they're coming back home and trying to reacclimate into the community, we're having a walk. It's a Freedom Loop. It's at Memory Grove on Memorial Day, May 27th. It's 1.5 miles. It recognizes the battle deaths, the lives that were lost, the men and women that put their lives on the line, the families that sacrifice day in and day out while they're gone, while they're deployed, and helps welcome them back home to the community. So if you want to be a part of that, I just say, come on out on Memorial Day. That's all I really have.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you coming by. I just wanted to make a couple quick announcements. One is, it's interesting, at ELPCO we talk about parking, where the rest of the city is actually talking about housing. There was a city council meeting this week that talked a lot about single room occupancy hotels, SROs. There's an ordinance the city is considering about that, as well as ADUs, accessory dwelling units. You got to know your acronyms to be in this business, I guess. But SROs and ADUs are definitely a big issue in the city right now. Just want to announce the SRO ordinance, which is a sort of hotels that people can stay in when they're kind of transitioning into housing or moving from homelessness to housing. Currently, the 9th and 9th area in ELPCO is exempt from that ordinance. So they would be mostly to the west of us, which would be kind of State Street, Ballpark area, and so forth like that. That ordinance isn't finalized yet, but that is something that is being discussed at the city. ADUs, though, are happening a lot in ELPCO. We got another notice today that someone wants to build an ADU in ELPCO. They have to get a zoning sort of conditional use permit to do it, but we expect to see those more. These are kind of like mother-in-law suites behind people's houses. So I think, you know, ELPCO is going to work with some of the other community councils, see if we can get some more information if people are interested in it. Darryl has a comment, I think.
And what that means is Jason and I got this email from city planning today notifying us about this ADU that's proposed to be built. So we will make that an agenda item in our May meeting. That's still within the 45-day deadline. And then it's a public hearing where you can make comments about it, but we are invited to come as council chairs to share your comments and feelings about those ADUs.
It's a new thing. The city just passed this ordinance about a couple months ago, I think, last year. But one thing that ELPCO wants to do is track where the ADUs are going, because what we don't want to see, and this is actually one of our land use advisors suggested, is like all of a sudden a street's got like 8 ADUs. So there's kind of a concentration issue. There's a sort of a distribution issue that we want to think about. So, right, and parking is an issue that comes up with that. There are some parking requirements for the ADU, including off-street parking is required for the unit. So, but something we're going to track.
And actually, I'll jump in. Just think ADUs down an alleyway and what parking would be like there. It's possible.
Yeah, and other people see it as a great solution to affordable housing, people aging in place, things like that. So there are some positive elements to it that we want to mention. One more thing is that ELPCO is joining up with 6 other community councils and perhaps more to host a mayor primary debate, a primary debate that's going to happen in July. The election is August 13th, so we'll get this debate done before the ballots go out at the end of July. We're partnering with Sugar House, a community council, Ballpark, Central City, Liberty Wells, all the ones kind of in the mid-city area, and we're kind of expanding outward as more people want to join us. We don't have a date or location yet, but we're looking at maybe July 17th or 18th at Westminster College, which is where we had the debates 2 years ago. It's going to actually be a debate. It's not going to be a forum where the candidates get up and get to say what they want. We're going to hit them with hard questions. And it's kind of hard when there's 9 or 10 candidates, but we're developing a system so that we can have people get direct questions and then have the ability to follow up on questions that come to other people. So we'll try not to have it be too much of a zoo, but we need a big stage.
They're understudies for the Democrats.
Right, yes. We'll have the big stage and the little stage. No, I mean, we're going to try to get everyone there. Other groups are actually restricting the people invited to the debates or doing a forum. We want to have something that kind of combines the best of a sort of a competitive and good, thoughtful exchange. So mid-July, hopefully Westminster College. Watch for more details on that. And hopefully you could attend. We'll also try to live stream it. Are there any other business from the audience? Actually, let's go to the audience and then Tom. So any other business or news or things that people want to bring up or suggestions for future topics? George? And then,
17th of July has 3 community councils. I urge you to move it to the 18th.
Gotcha. Some community councils will sacrifice their meeting just to have the debate. So, Okay, all right. Well, that it is an option, but I appreciate you letting us know that.
Duly noted.
They're outside of this area. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know. Thanks.